This is Lebanon's crisis. People can't get the things they need for daily life.
In the Middle East, new protests are clogging streets and rattling regimes. In the last few months, there have been big protests in Lebanon, Iraq and Iran. Growing anger in Egypt against a brutal police state, and last spring the Algerian president was forced out. Every country has homegrown grievances, but the demonstrators share some deep-seated frustrations. Mostly, they're young. More than 60% of the population in the Middle East is under 30. And they're angry, fed up with unemployment and corruption. They see hard lives stretching before them, while political elites keep the power and the money. This demonstration was at the central bank in Beirut.
The crowd's been going through a variety of their favorite chants about revolution, about telling the governor of the bank to get out and accusing them of being thieves, and also the chant that was the soundtrack of the uprisings of 2011, the people want the fall of the regime, which was the vessel for some high hopes that came to nothing.
The Lebanese are faced with a collapsing economy. Most people in the Middle East outside the oil states are hard up, and many others are poor and getting poorer. Lebanon is running out of hard currency. It needs dollars because almost everything in the shops is imported. It's not just money. Protesters in Lebanon have had enough of their country's deep sectarian divisions.
My name is Ali Amhaz. I am a graduate student and activist. I think we have, for the first time, a feeling of hope, a feeling of solidarity as Lebanese people. And it goes beyond the typical cliches of, oh, you know, coexistence, and now I can hang out with my Dirzi friend and my Christian friend and whatever. We're even beyond that. We have normalized each other's presence for the first time since the Civil War.
Giovanni Ferral has been involved in the protests in Beirut since they started on the 17th of October. She comes down to a tented protest camp after she finishes classes at university.
When you're doing those chants, how does it feel?
It feels great. It is great, you know. Like for some minute you feel that you are in power, you know. It's a great feeling, and especially when you see people like with their voice and eyes, they are just meaning the stuff they are yelling. They want that.
This is Beirut's Revolution Wall, a place for artistically minded protesters. In Lebanon, the protests have mostly been peaceful, but in Iraq and Iran, in the last few weeks, hundreds of people have been shot dead in the streets. Some people think that what's happening is a rerun of the uprisings of 2011, which convulsed the Middle East. Back then, there were high hopes of freedom and a new start, but that was until the old order struck back. But the grievances that drove 2011 never went away.
Tempers are short. There was a near riot when this filling station in Beirut closed while they were still queuing.
People here are fed up because they can't get the fuel that they say is in the petrol station, and now some of them want to block the road. This is Lebanon's crisis. People can't get the things they need for daily life, and that means there's more than frayed tempers, it's real anger.
Rania Nasser al-Din wanted petrol too. She'd abandoned her car after it ran out.
What's life like without things like petrol?
It is very essential, and here we are suffering. We pay everything for double of its price. I guess it is the most expensive country over here. But this is life.
How will you get a better life in Lebanon?
You have to work hard. You have to work harder than anywhere else.
I think they believe there's some fuel down the road, don't they? There's another petrol station.
I could hear that. Yes,
Yeah.
I would,
That's what they were saying.
Of course, I would go. I don't want to spend all night.
Well, good luck. We won't keep you. You go and get some fuel.
Okay.
All right?
Okay, thank you.
The protests in Lebanon started after an attempt to increase taxes. But that was just the last straw. The real anger comes from a long-running economic crisis, presided over by leaders widely believed to be corrupt. Rania found some petrol. She invited us to visit for a quieter chat.
When you saw the big demonstrations starting in October,
Yeah.
what did you think?
That the change is coming, something deep inside. You feel trembling. You feel like crying because you couldn't do this before. There were so many restrictions.
But if you try and change things, there's a risk that it becomes unbalanced.
You have to make the adventure and then see the results. As if you are gambling, You have to take the risk to gain. If you don't take the risk, you will stay as you are.
Overlooking the Mediterranean, a group of protesters held a vigil at the Iraqi embassy in Beirut.
You know, I think there's a sense here in Lebanon that in their demonstrations they've been quite lucky because everything that's happened has been largely peaceful. In Iraq, it's the opposite. That's one of the young boys who's been killed in Iraq.
His name is Musa, and it says that he didn't know that his last candle was going to be blown up by the gunfire.
Well, like a birthday candle.
Yes, exactly.
The scenes yesterday really broke my heart. We've seen coffins in the streets of Iraqi cities. All of young Iraqis who just went to the street to demand basic demands to live better in a country free of militias. And here in Lebanon, we feel very related to what's happening in Iraq because we also are protesting in the street. We want to live in dignity in our country, free of any foreign interference. So that's why I felt really related to their crisis.
In Iraq's protests, around 400 people, mostly young men, have been shot dead by the security forces. More than 15,000 have been injured. Iraq is one of the most corrupt and badly governed countries in the world. Demonstrators are prepared to risk death because they're desperate about corruption, unemployment, without even 24/7 mains electricity in a country with big oil reserves. They don't just blame their own inept politicians, they're also targeting Iraq's alliance with Iran, torching its consulates in the holy cities of Najaf and Karbala. For Iran, this was supposed to be friendly territory. Hezbollah's patrons in Iran have serious problems at home too. Big protests started in Iran in the last fortnight after a rise in petrol prices. Crushing American sanctions have made matters worse in an economy already weakened by corruption and mismanagement. BBC Persian estimates that more than 200 were killed by the regime. Iran's ally Hezbollah sent thugs to try to break up the demonstrations in Beirut, without success. But that's not the end of it. Hezbollah is powerful and heavily armed, and it's worked for 40 years to dominate Lebanon. The status quo suits them, and they don't want it to change.
Well, the time's come now to try to join the dots. Let's say there are two main camps in the Middle East. One of them we can call Team America. It also includes Saudi Arabia and Israel. The other one is Team Iran. It also includes the Assad regime in Syria, Iraq, and the strongest single group here in Lebanon, Hezbollah, which is a Shia Muslim movement. Now, the Iranians need their allies. They use them to try to project power. But they've got a real problem at the moment because the demonstrations have shown that anti-Iranian feeling is growing in Iraq and here in Lebanon.
Across the region, there are demonstrations against local grievances. And there's shared, deep-seated anger that crosses borders among the young who want to sweep away discredited, inept and corrupt leaders. It all feeds into the geopolitical instability of the world's most turbulent region. Another storm is brewing in the Middle East.